Omega was forced to sing the Luna hymn as a joke, but her voice left. The Lycan King, shocked. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. The grand hall of the Silvercrest Pack echoed with laughter, sharp and cruel as winter wind through bare branches. Arabelle Stormweaver stood at the center of the gathering, her slight frame trembling beneath the weight of 100 contemptuous stares. Her blonde hair, usually kept in a modest braid, hung loose around her shoulders, deliberately disheveled by hands that had shoved her forward moments ago. The white fabric of her simple dress seemed to glow against her pale skin under the torchlight, making her appear ethereal and vulnerable all at once. She was an Omega, the lowest rank in a world that worshipped strength and dominance. And tonight, at the annual Pack Summit, where alphas from across the territories gathered to display their power, she had been chosen for entertainment of the cruelest kind. Marcus Ironjaw, the alpha who had rejected her as his mate 3 moons ago, stood among his packmates with a twisted smile curling his lips. The rejection had been public, humiliating, delivered with words that still carved wounds into her soul each time she remembered them. "You are too weak, too broken, too worthless to stand beside me." The bond between them had shattered like glass, leaving her with phantom pains that never quite faded. Now he wanted to mock her further. "Sing for us, little Omega," Marcus called out, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "Sing the Luna hymn. Show the Lycan King what passes for talent in the lower ranks." The mention of the Lycan King sent a ripple of tension through the crowd. Constantine Blackmore sat upon a throne-like chair at the far end of the hall, a figure carved from shadows and midnight. He was massive, his muscular frame draped in black leather and silver chains that caught the firelight. His hair fell in long, dark waves past his shoulders, framing a face that could have been chiseled from stone, all sharp angles and fierce beauty. No beard softened his strong jaw, and his eyes held the weight of centuries, pale gray like storm clouds before lightning strikes. He had not spoken since arriving at the summit. He simply watched, his presence alone commanding absolute silence from even the most arrogant alphas. Legends surrounded him like smoke, tales of his brutality in battle, of enemies torn apart by claws and fangs, of territories conquered and threats eliminated with ruthless efficiency. He was not merely a king. He was death itself, given form and purpose. And now those storm-gray eyes fixed upon Arabelle. She wanted to run, to disappear into the forest and never return. But Omegas did not have the luxury of choice. To refuse would mean punishment, perhaps death. The Pack Summit operated under ancient laws, and defiance of an alpha's command, even one as petty as this, could not go unanswered. Her hands clenched at her sides, nails biting into her palms. The Luna hymn was sacred, a song sung only by the mate of an alpha during bonding ceremonies, a prayer to the moon goddess for strength, protection, and eternal love. To force an unmated Omega to sing, it was mockery of the highest order, a deliberate desecration meant to shame her before the most powerful wolves in existence. "Please," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Don't make me." Marcus laughed, the sound joined by others around him. "Sing, or be cast out into the wildlands without protection. Your choice, Omega." The wildlands were death for a lone wolf, especially an Omega. Rogues hunted there, feral creatures who had lost their humanity, who would tear her apart for sport. Arabelle closed her eyes, feeling tears burn behind her lids. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. If she must be humiliated, she would endure it with what little dignity remained to her. She drew in a breath, feeling it fill her lungs like cold water, and then she began to sing. Her voice emerged soft at first, hesitant and trembling like a bird testing broken wings. The words of the Luna hymn were ancient, written in the old tongue, syllables that tasted of moonlight and sorrow. She had learned them as a child, whispered to herself in moments of loneliness, imagining a future where someone might love her enough to hear them sung in truth. That future had died with Marcus's rejection. But as she sang, something shifted. The trembling faded. Her voice grew stronger, clearer, rising through the hall like silver light breaking through storm clouds. It carried emotion she had buried deep within herself, all the loneliness and longing, all the dreams that had withered in darkness, all the love she had never been allowed to give. The ancient words became a lament, beautiful and heartbreaking, filled with a purity of feeling that transcended the mockery that had prompted them. The laughter died. Silence descended, profound and absolute. Even the crackling of the torches seemed to quiet, as though the fire itself paused to listen. Arabelle's voice soared higher, weaving through the rafters, filling every corner of the vast hall with sound that resonated in the chest like a second heartbeat. It was not merely singing. It was magic, raw and untamed, the kind that had been lost to most of their kind generations ago. She sang of the moon goddess watching over her children, of the bond between souls that transcended flesh and time, of love that could heal even the deepest wounds. Her voice broke on certain phrases, cracking with genuine anguish, and those imperfections made the song more powerful, more real, stripping away pretense to reveal truth beneath. When the final note faded into silence, Arabelle opened her eyes. Tears streaked her cheeks now, unbidden and unstoppable. She had poured everything into that song, every piece of her shattered heart, and now she stood empty before them all. The first sound that broke the silence was not laughter or applause. It was the scrape of a throne being pushed back. Constantine Blackmore rose to his feet, his movement fluid despite his size. Every eye turned to him, alphas and betas straightening instinctively, submission radiating from them like heat. He took a step forward, then another, his boots echoing against the stone floor with measured precision. He walked toward Arabelle, and the crowd parted before him like water before the prow of a ship. She could not move, could not breathe, pinned in place by the intensity of his gaze. Up close, he was even more imposing, towering over her by more than a foot, his presence overwhelming. She could feel the power radiating from him, ancient and terrible, the kind of strength that could crush her without effort. But when he stopped before her, close enough that she could smell cedar and winter night on his skin, his expression was not one of anger or contempt. His storm-gray eyes were wide, something like shock or wonder flickering in their depths. "Who taught you to sing like that?" His voice was deep, rough as gravel, yet it held a gentleness that seemed incongruous with everything she knew of him. Arabelle's voice came out as barely a whisper. "No one, Your Majesty. I learned from listening, from dreaming." His jaw tightened. For a long moment he simply stared at her, searching her face as though trying to read secrets written there. Then he turned, his gaze sweeping across the assembled wolves. And when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "The Omega is under my protection. Anyone who seeks to harm her or mock her again will answer to me personally." He paused, letting the threat sink in. "Am I understood?" The response was immediate, voices overlapping in affirmation. Even Marcus had gone pale. His earlier bravado evaporated like morning mist. Constantine turned back to Arabelle, and this time he extended his hand to her, palm up in an offering. "Come with me. We need to talk." She stared at his hand, scarred and powerful, trembling with the urge to take it, and the fear of what that might mean. But she had learned long ago that refusing a Lycan king was not an option, even if he phrased it as a request. She placed her small hand in his, feeling his fingers close around hers with surprising gentleness. His skin was warm, almost hot, and the contact sent an unexpected shiver up her arm. He led her from the hall, leaving behind a crowd of stunned wolves and 1,000 unanswered questions. The corridors of Silvercrest Keep were cold and dimly lit, carved from ancient stone that held the chill of winter even in summer months. Constantine did not speak as he guided her through them, his hand still holding hers as though afraid she might disappear if he let go. Arabelle's mind raced, trying to understand what had just happened. Why the most feared creature in their world had claimed protection over a worthless Omega. He brought her to a private chamber, smaller than she had expected, furnished simply with a desk, chairs, and a fireplace where flames danced orange and gold. He released her hand only to close the door behind them, granting them privacy from curious ears. Then he turned to face her, and in the firelight, his features seemed softer, less the monster of legend, and more simply a man carrying burdens too heavy to name. "What is your name?" he asked. "Arabelle Stormweaver, Your Majesty." "Constantine," he corrected. "When we are alone, you will call me Constantine." She blinked in surprise. To use a Lycan King's given name was an intimacy reserved for family, for mates, for those closest to the throne. "I don't understand," she whispered. He moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames as though they held answers. His long black hair caught the light, and she noticed for the first time the exhaustion in the set of his shoulders, the weight of loneliness that clung to him like a second skin. 300 years, he said quietly. "I have ruled for 300 years, Arabelle. I have conquered territories, destroyed threats to our kind, maintained order through strength and fear. I have done everything required of me as king." He paused, his hands clenching at his sides. "But the moon goddess cursed me long ago for my sins, for the blood I spilled in my youth, for the darkness in my soul. She decreed that I would never find my true mate, that I would walk alone until the end of my days." Arabelle's breath caught. Every wolf yearned for their mate, the one soul destined to complete them. To be denied that was a torment beyond imagining. "I accepted my fate," Constantine continued, his voice rough with old pain. "I stopped looking, stopped hoping. I became what everyone feared me to be, nothing more than a weapon in service to our kind." He turned to face her then, and in his eyes, she saw something that stole the air from her lungs. "Until I heard you sing." "I don't understand," she repeated, her voice shaking. He crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides, stopping so close that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "The Luna hymn is not just a song, Arabelle. It is a prayer, a summoning. When sung by the true mate of a wolf, it resonates with a power that cannot be faked, cannot be replicated." His hand rose, hesitating just before touching her face, trembling with restraint. "Your voice called to something in me that has been dead for centuries. It woke a bond I thought impossible." Realization crashed over her like a wave. "No," she breathed. "That's not possible. I'm an Omega. You're a Lycan King. The moon goddess would never—" "The moon goddess works in ways we cannot comprehend," Constantine interrupted, his voice fierce now. "I felt it the moment you began to sing. The pull, the recognition, the absolute certainty that you are mine, and I am yours." His hand finally made contact, cupping her cheek with a tenderness that contradicted everything she knew of him. "Tell me you did not feel it too. Tell me your soul did not reach for mine when our eyes met." Arabelle wanted to deny it. She wanted to say that he was mistaken, that she had felt nothing. But that would be a lie. The moment their eyes had locked across that hall, something inside her had sparked to life, a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the torches or the crowd. It had felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering lost in darkness. "I felt it," she admitted, tears spilling over again. "But I don't understand why. I'm nothing, Constantine. I'm broken, rejected, worthless. What could the moon goddess possibly see in me that makes me worthy of you?" His other hand came up, framing her face between his palms, as he leaned down until their foreheads nearly touched. "You are not worthless. You have never been worthless. That fool who rejected you was blind to what you are, to the strength hidden beneath your gentle exterior." His thumbs brushed away her tears with infinite care. "I have been surrounded by alphas and warriors my entire existence, by creatures who pride themselves on dominance and power. But your song held more true strength than all of them combined. It held courage to stand vulnerable before those who would hurt you. It held love despite every reason you have been given to hate. That is not weakness, Arabelle. That is the purest form of power that exists." His words broke something inside her, some wall she had built to protect herself from further pain. A sob escaped her throat, and then she was crying in earnest. Years of suppressed anguish, pouring out of her in waves. Constantine pulled her against his chest, wrapping his arms around her small frame as though he could shield her from the world itself. He was so warm, so solid, and she clung to him like he was the only steady point in a spinning universe. I have you, he murmured against her hair, his deep voice rumbling through his chest. I will never let anyone hurt you again. This I swear on my crown, on my life, on every drop of blood in my veins. They stood like that for a long time, the fire crackling beside them, until her tears finally subsided into shaky breaths. When she pulled back enough to look up at him, she found him watching her with an expression so tender it made her heart ache. What happens now? She asked. A small smile curved his lips, the first she had seen from him, and it transformed his face from fierce to breathtaking. Now, we learn each other. We build the bond between us properly, with time and care. His smile faded slightly. I will not claim you until you are ready, Arabelle. I know you have been hurt, rejected. I will not add to that pain by rushing what should be sacred. The consideration in his words, the respect for her feelings despite the mate bond pulling at them both, made something warm bloom in her chest. You are not what I expected, she said softly. What did you expect? A monster, a tyrant, something cold and cruel. His expression darkened. I am those things, to those who threaten what is mine. I have done terrible things, Arabelle. My hands are stained with blood that will never wash clean. I am not a good man. She reached up, her small hand covering one of his where it still rested against her cheek. Perhaps, she said, but you are a good man to me. That is enough. Something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes, and he leaned down, pressing his lips to her forehead in a kiss that felt like a brand, a claiming, a promise all at once. You undo me, he whispered against her skin. 300 years of iron control, and one Omega with a voice like starlight brings me to my knees. I did not mean to, she said, a hint of teasing entering her voice despite everything. He pulled back to look at her, and his smile returned, wider this time. Yes, you did, whether you knew it or not. The days that followed were strange and wonderful in equal measure. Constantine did not announce their bond immediately, instead keeping her close while he navigated the political complexities of the Pack Summit. He installed her in chambers adjacent to his own, furnished with every comfort, and assigned guards to her door not as jailers, but as protectors. The whispers started immediately. An Omega, elevated to such status, impossible, scandalous. The rejection from Marcus had made her an object of pity and scorn. Now she was an object of fascination and envy. Constantine handled the rumors with characteristic efficiency, making it clear through word and action that Arabelle was under his personal protection, and that any disrespect toward her would be met with his wrath. It was enough to silence the open mockery, but she could still feel the weight of judgment in every stare. She saw little of Marcus, though she learned through castle gossip that he had been nearly beside himself with shock and rage upon learning of the Lycan King's interest in her. The Alpha who had deemed her unworthy now saw her claimed by someone infinitely more powerful, and the irony was not lost on anyone. But Arabelle tried not to think of Marcus. He belonged to a past that grew more distant with each passing day. Constantine came to her every evening after his duties were complete, sometimes late into the night. They would sit by the fire in her chambers or walk in the gardens beneath the stars, talking for hours about everything and nothing. He told her of his long life, of battles fought and won, of loneliness that had carved him hollow over centuries. She told him of her childhood in a pack that had never valued her, of dreams whispered to the moon when she thought no one listened, of a love for singing that had been her only solace. He was gentle with her in a way that seemed to surprise even himself, his rough hands learning to touch her with reverence, as though she were something precious and fragile. But she was learning that she was not as fragile as she had believed. In his presence, she felt stronger, braver, like she could become whoever she was meant to be. On their 5th evening together, he arrived at her chambers with something hidden behind his back, an almost boyish smile playing at his lips. It was such an unexpected expression on his usually stern face that she could not help but laugh. "What are you hiding, Constantine?" He brought his hand forward, revealing a single white rose, perfect and luminous in the firelight. But it was not an ordinary rose. Tiny crystals of ice clung to its petals, making it sparkle like captured starlight, and it radiated a faint magical glow. "It is an ice rose," he explained, offering it to her with surprising shyness. "They grow only in the highest peaks of the northern mountains, in places where winter never releases its grip. I sent for it the day after we met." His storm-gray eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "It is said that ice roses never wilt, never fade, that they remain perfect for eternity. Like my feelings for you." Arabelle took the rose with trembling hands, marveling at how something so delicate could exist in such harsh conditions, much like herself. "It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." "No," Constantine said softly, reaching out to tuck a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." The rose pales in comparison. Heat flooded her cheeks, and she looked down, still unused to such open admiration. But Constantine gently tilted her chin up with his fingers, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Do not hide from me, Arabelle. Never hide your beauty, your light. I have lived in darkness for so long. Let me bask in your radiance." The vulnerability in his voice, the raw need, made her heart ache with tenderness. She set the rose carefully aside and rose on her toes, pressing a soft kiss to his cheek. It was innocent, chaste, but his sharp intake of breath told her how deeply it affected him. "You are not dark, Constantine," she whispered against his skin. "You have only forgotten how to let yourself feel the light." His arms came around her then, pulling her close against his powerful frame, and they stood like that for a long time, simply holding each other, two lonely souls finding solace in closeness. As the nights progressed, their touches became more frequent, more lingering. Constantine would take her hand as they walked, his thumb tracing circles on her palm that sent shivers up her arm. She would reach up to brush snow from his hair after their walks in the winter gardens, her fingers trailing through the long, dark strands. Each touch was electric, charged with the mate bond that pulled at them constantly. But Constantine never pushed for more than she was ready to give. One evening, she found him in the library, surrounded by ancient texts, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up as she entered, and his expression softened immediately. "I did not hear you come in." "You were very focused." She moved closer, curious. "What are you reading?" "Histories of the Luna Blessed," he admitted. "I want to understand your heritage, to learn everything I can about what you are, what you might become." He reached out, catching her hand and pulling her gently to sit beside him. "Listen to this. It says here that the Luna Blessed could weave emotions into their songs, could make warriors weep or cowards find courage, could mend broken hearts and shattered minds with nothing but their voices." Arabelle looked at the faded text, written in a script so old she could barely decipher it. "Do you think I could learn to do such things?" "I think you already do them without trying." Constantine's free hand came up to cup her face, his touch infinitely tender. "Every time you sing, you weave emotion into the very air. You made me feel again, Arabelle. After 300 years of numbness, you made my dead heart beat with life." The raw honesty in his words brought tears to her eyes. She turned her face into his palm, pressing a kiss there, and felt him shudder at the contact. "Constantine," she breathed, and there was question in her voice, uncertainty mixed with desire. He understood immediately. "We do not have to rush," he said, though she could see the restraint in the tension of his jaw, could feel it in the way his hand trembled slightly against her skin. "I will wait for you as long as you need. What if I do not want to wait?" The words came out barely above a whisper, but they hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. His eyes darkened, pupils dilating until only a ring of silver remained. "Arabelle, if you are not certain..." She silenced him by pressing her fingers to his lips. "I am certain of you. I am certain of us. I am certain that I want to know what it feels like to be loved by you completely." The sound that escaped his throat was part growl, part groan, entirely possessive. But even then, even with desire clearly burning in his eyes, he moved slowly, carefully, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. He leaned in, his lips hovering just above hers, his breath warm against her mouth. "Tell me to stop, and I will," he murmured. "Always, Arabelle. Your word is law to me." Instead of answering with words, she closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was soft and exploratory at first but quickly deepened into something more. Constantine responded with barely restrained passion, one hand tangling in her blonde hair, while the other pressed against the small of her back, drawing her closer. He kissed her like she was air, and he was drowning, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, and she felt herself melting into him, all her fears and doubts evaporating like morning mist. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as though in prayer. "You undo me," he whispered, completely and utterly. She smiled, her hands coming up to frame his face, feeling the strong line of his jaw beneath her palms. "Good, because you have undone me as well." They stayed in the library until the fire burned low, alternating between heated kisses and soft conversations, learning the taste and texture of each other, exploring the boundaries of desire and restraint. Constantine was always careful, always attuned to her responses, pulling back whenever he sensed even the slightest hesitation, praising her with words that made her feel cherished beyond measure. The next morning, Arabelle woke to find a small package outside her door, wrapped in silver silk. Inside was a delicate necklace, a pendant shaped like a howling wolf wrought in silver and set with moonstones that gleamed with inner light. She recognized the craftsmanship immediately as Constantine's personal symbol, and when she clasped it around her neck, she felt a surge of warmth, his essence somehow woven into the metal. She wore it to breakfast, and when she entered the dining hall where he sat with his advisors, his eyes immediately found the pendant resting against her collarbone. The smile that crossed his face was private, intimate, meant only for her, and she felt heat bloom in her chest at the look. Later, when they were alone in the gardens, he drew her into a secluded alcove surrounded by winter roses and kissed her breathless, his hands reverent as they traced the line of the necklace against her skin. "You are mine," he murmured against her lips, "and I am yours. This is my promise, Arabelle, that I will protect you, cherish you, love you for all my days. And I promise the same to you," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You are not alone anymore, Constantine. You will never be alone again." One night, perhaps a week after the summit began, Constantine took her to a balcony overlooking the forest. The moon hung full and bright above them, turning the world silver in shadow. He stood behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on top of her head. "I must return to my territory soon," he said quietly. "The summit ends in 3 days." Arabelle's heart clenched. She had known this moment would come, but she was not ready for it. "Will you come with me?" he asked. "Not as my mate, not yet, but as my guest. Give yourself time to know me, to see my home, to decide if you can accept a life at my side." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "You would let me refuse?" His expression was solemn. "I would let you do anything, Arabelle, even if it destroyed me." The sincerity in his voice left no room for doubt. He meant it. Despite the mate bond, despite his power, he would let her walk away if she chose. But she did not want to walk away. The thought of being separated from him now caused a physical ache in her chest. "I will come," she said. Relief flooded his features, so profound it made him look younger. "You honor me." She smiled, reaching up to touch his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "You honor me, Constantine. Every day." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent warmth racing up her arm. "When we reach my home, there is something I must tell you, something I have discovered about you that changes everything." Curiosity sparked in her. "What is it?" "Not yet," he said. "Some truths are too important to be shared in borrowed spaces. But know this, Arabella Stormweaver, you are far more than you believe yourself to be." His words lingered in her mind long after he left her that night, filled with mystery and promise. The journey to Constantine's territory took 3 days by horse and carriage. He rode beside her for most of it, never straying far, his presence a constant source of comfort and security. His guards formed a protective circle around them, fierce warriors who showed her surprising respect once they understood she held their king's favor. They traveled through forests ancient and deep, across rivers that sang with rushing water, through valleys where wildflowers bloomed in riots of color. Arabelle had never left the lands of her birth pack before, and the world beyond was more beautiful than she had imagined. Constantine pointed out landmarks and told her stories of the history woven into the landscape, his deep voice painting pictures with words. She learned that he was not merely brutal in battle, but also intelligent, thoughtful, capable of surprising wit when he allowed himself to relax. And he was devoted to her in ways both large and small. He made sure she was comfortable, that she had food and water, that she was never cold or afraid. When they stopped to rest, he personally saw to her needs before attending to anything else. His warriors watched this behavior with barely concealed amazement, whispering among themselves about the change in their king. On the first night of their journey, they made camp in a clearing surrounded by towering pines. Constantine had a tent erected for her, luxurious even by traveling standards, with soft furs and cushions. But as darkness fell and the sounds of the forest grew louder around them, she found herself unable to sleep, anxiety creeping in despite her exhaustion. A soft knock came at the tent entrance. "Arabelle, are you awake?" Constantine's voice immediately soothed her nerves. "Yes, come in." He entered, ducking beneath the low entrance, and even in the dim light of the lantern, she could see the concern etched on his features. He had removed his armor and wore only dark pants and a loose shirt that revealed the strong column of his throat. "I felt your distress through the bond," he said quietly. "Are you unwell?" She shook her head, embarrassed. "I am simply unused to sleeping in unfamiliar places. The forest sounds are so different from the keep." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Would you like me to stay with you? Just until you fall asleep. I give you my word, I will not—" "Please," she interrupted, relief flooding through her. "I would feel safer with you near." He settled beside her on the furs, maintaining a respectful distance, but she found herself gravitating toward his warmth, drawn by instinct and need. Eventually, she rested her head against his shoulder, and his arm came around her, holding her close. "Tell me about your home," she murmured. "About Blackmore." His deep voice rumbled through his chest as he spoke, describing the city he had built over centuries, the people who lived there, the mountains that rose behind it like ancient guardians. His hand stroked her hair absently as he talked, the gentle motion soothing her into drowsiness. "It will be your home too," he said softly. "If you choose to stay, I want you to love it as I do." "I think I will love anywhere you are," she admitted, her eyes growing heavy. She felt him press a kiss to the top of her head, his lips lingering there. "Sleep, my heart. I will keep watch over you." She drifted off to the sound of his heartbeat, steady and strong, feeling more protected than she ever had in her life. She woke in the morning to find him still there, though he sat upright now, clearly having stayed awake through the night to guard her sleep. When their eyes met, something passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. "You stayed all night," she said. "I will always stay," he replied simply. "For as long as you need me." The second night, there was no pretense. Constantine came to her tent without being summoned, and she welcomed him into her sleeping space without hesitation. They lay facing each other in the darkness, talking in whispers about dreams and fears, about the future that stretched before them full of possibility and uncertainty. At some point, their hands found each other in the space between them, fingers intertwining, and Arabelle marveled at how such a simple touch could feel so profound. Constantine's thumb traced patterns on the back of her hand, each stroke deliberate and tender. "I have never done this before," he confessed. "Courted someone, cared for someone this way. In my youth, before the curse, relationships were about politics and power. And after, I simply stopped trying." His eyes found hers in the dim light. "But with you, everything feels new. I want to do this properly, to give you all the things you deserve. You are already giving me everything," Arabelle said, bringing their joined hands to her lips and kissing his knuckles. Your time, your protection, your honesty. What more could I ask for? Your happiness, he said fiercely. Your joy. I want to hear you laugh every day. I want to see you smile with no shadow of past pain darkening it. I want to watch you discover who you truly are and become that person fully. Emotion welled in her throat. Constantine, you make me happier than I ever thought possible. He moved closer then, closing the small distance between them, and kissed her with a gentleness that made her eyes sting with tears. It was different from their passionate kisses in the library, softer but no less meaningful, a promise wrapped in tenderness. When he pulled back, his hand came up to cup her cheek. I am falling in love with you, Arabelle Stormweaver. No, that is not quite right. I have already fallen. I am drowning in love for you, and I have no desire to surface. Then drown with me, she whispered, pulling him back for another kiss. Because I am falling too, and it is the most terrifying and wonderful thing I have ever felt. They fell asleep tangled together, her back pressed against his chest, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist, fitting together like pieces of a puzzle finally made whole. By the third day of travel, the tension between them had shifted, deepened. Every glance held weight. Every touch lingered longer than necessary. Constantine helped her mount and dismount her horse with his hands on her waist, and she could feel the restraint in his grip, the desire he kept carefully leashed. She found excuses to touch him, to adjust his collar or brush dust from his shoulder, reveling in the way his breath would catch, the way his eyes would darken with want. His warriors noticed, of course, but they were careful to give their king and his intended mate privacy whenever possible, falling back or scouting ahead at convenient moments. On the third evening, they crested a hill, and she saw his home for the first time. The fortress city of Blackmoor spread across the valley below, all dark stone and silver spires, beautiful and imposing in equal measure. Lights glowed in windows like earthbound stars, and she could see wolves moving through the streets, going about their evening business. It is magnificent, she breathed. Constantine smiled, pride evident in his expression. It is yours now, as much as it is mine. Everything I have, everything I am, I lay at your feet. They descended into the city, as twilight deepened into night, and she watched in wonder as people emerged from their homes to watch them pass. She expected hostility or suspicion, but instead she saw curiosity and something that might have been hope. The main keep rose at the city's heart, a massive structure that spoke of power and permanence. Servants lined up to greet them, bowing deeply as Constantine helped her from the carriage with his own hands. "Welcome home, my lord," an elderly woman said, her eyes kind as they took in Arabelle. "Thank you, Elena," Constantine replied. "Please prepare the rose chambers for our guest. She is to be given every comfort and courtesy." "Of course, my lord." He led Arabelle through halls of polished stone, past tapestries depicting ancient battles and quiet gardens, until they reached a set of doors carved with intricate roses. He opened them to reveal chambers more beautiful than anything she had ever seen, all soft fabrics and warm colors, with a balcony overlooking gardens that glowed with moonlight. "These belong to my mother," he said quietly. "They have been empty since her death 2 centuries ago. I want you to have them." Arabelle touched a silk curtain, marveling at the luxury surrounding her. "Constantine, this is too much. It is not nearly enough." He moved to stand behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow, I will show you something that will answer questions you did not know to ask." That night, alone in chambers fit for a queen, Arabelle lay in a bed softer than clouds and stared at the ceiling. Her life had changed so completely in the span of weeks that she barely recognized herself. She was no longer the rejected Omega, mocked and scorned. She was someone precious to a king, protected and cherished. But Constantine's words from earlier haunted her. "You are far more than you believe yourself to be." What did he mean? What secret did he hold? Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of singing and silver light. Morning arrived with soft sunlight streaming through gauzy curtains. Arabelle bathed in a tub of heated water, dressed in a gown of pale blue silk that had been laid out for her, someone having taken her measurements while she slept. When she emerged from her chambers, she found Constantine waiting in the hall, dressed more casually than she had seen him, in dark pants and a simple shirt that still could not hide the powerful build of his frame. "Good morning," he said, his eyes warming as they took her in. "You look beautiful." She felt herself blush. "Thank you." He offered his arm, and she took it, letting him guide her through the keep and out into the gardens beyond. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached a building separate from the main structure, round and domed, with walls of white stone that seemed to glow in the daylight. "This is the Archive of Bloodlines," Constantine explained. "It contains the genealogical records of every pack, every alpha line, every omega born in the last 1,000 years. He paused before the door, his expression serious. "After I heard you sing, after I felt the bond between us, I could not let the mystery rest. So I sent word ahead, had my scholars research your bloodline." Arabelle's heart began to race. "What did they find?" He pushed open the door, revealing a vast circular room filled with shelves of ancient books and scrolls. An elderly male wolf stood at the center, bent over a massive tome, but he straightened as they entered and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty," the scholar said, "and you must be Arabelle Stormweaver." "I am." The scholar gestured to the book before him. "What I am about to tell you will seem impossible, my lady, but every word is verified by documents and records that cannot be disputed." Constantine's hand found hers, squeezing gently in support. The scholar cleared his throat. "Your mother, Celestine Stormweaver, was indeed an Omega as your records indicate, but your father was not the beta male listed in your pack documents. Your true father was Aldrich Moonsinger, the last of the Luna Blessed bloodline." Arabelle stared at him, uncomprehending. "Luna Blessed? An ancient line," the scholar explained, "believed to be descended from the moon goddess herself. They possessed abilities that others did not, chief among them voices capable of channeling pure divine magic." He looked at her with something like reverence. "The line was thought extinct, ended when Aldrich Moonsinger was killed in battle 30 years ago, months before you were born." Her mind reeled. "That's impossible. I am an Omega. I have no power, no strength. You have been classified as an Omega," Constantine said gently, "because our kind no longer knew how to recognize what you truly are. The Luna Blessed were never about physical dominance, Arabelle. They were about spiritual power, about magic that transcends the rules we live by." The scholar nodded. "When you sang the Luna hymn, you proved your heritage beyond doubt. Only one of the Luna Blessed could channel that kind of power through song. The magic in your voice is not Omega weakness. It is divine strength." Arabelle sank into a nearby chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "Why did no one know? Why did my mother never tell me?" "Your mother died giving birth to you," the scholar said softly, "and your father died before you were born. The beta male who claimed you as his daughter did so to protect you. Had the truth been known, there are those who would have sought to control you or destroy you out of fear." Constantine knelt before her, taking both her hands in his. "Do you understand what this means? You are not a weak Omega. You are the last of a line so powerful that even I in all my years have only heard of them in legends. You are descended from the goddess herself." She looked into his storm-gray eyes, seeing truth reflected there. "Is that why we are mates? Because of my bloodline?" "No," he said fiercely. "The bloodline explains your power, but it does not explain the bond. That is something else, something purely between us. The moon goddess gave us to each other not because of what we are, but because of who we are. You are mine, and I am yours because our souls recognized each other across centuries of loneliness." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I don't know how to be what you say I am." "You already are," Constantine said, reaching up to wipe away her tears. "You have always been. You simply did not know the name for it." He pulled her to her feet, drawing her close. "And I will help you discover the full extent of your abilities. Together, we will unlock what has been dormant inside you all these years." She rested her forehead against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. I'm afraid. I know. His arms tightened around her. But you are not alone anymore. You will never be alone again. The following weeks were a journey of discovery, unlike anything Arabelle had imagined. Constantine brought in scholars and historians, those few who remembered the old ways, and they began to teach her about her heritage. The Luna Blessed had not merely been singers. They had been healers, seers, guardians of sacred knowledge. Their voices could mend wounds, break curses, calm madness, even turn the tide of battles through songs of courage or fear. But accessing that power required training, meditation, learning to open herself to the divine energy that flowed through her bloodline. Constantine was with her for every lesson, encouraging her when she grew frustrated, celebrating her smallest victories as though they were grand triumphs. She learned that her voice could do more than simply sound beautiful. When she sang with intention, focusing her will, she could make flowers bloom out of season, could soothe the pain of injuries, could even see glimpses of possible futures in the patterns of her song. It was exhausting and exhilarating, terrifying and wonderful. And through it all, her bond with Constantine deepened. He showed her every corner of his territory, introduced her to his people, who gradually came to accept and even love their king's strange, gentle Omega, who was not really an Omega at all. He was never harsh with her, never demanded more than she could give, but his devotion was absolute. She saw him as the Lycan King in council meetings, fierce and commanding, making decisions with swift efficiency, intimidating even the most dominant alphas into submission with nothing more than a look. But with her, he was only Constantine, the male who brought her flowers from the garden, who read to her in the evenings, who held her when nightmares of her past came to haunt her sleep. The duality of his nature fascinated her. He could be death itself to his enemies, a force of nature that nothing could withstand. But with her, he was tender as spring rain, patient as stone, devoted in ways that made her feel like the most precious thing in existence. One afternoon, after a particularly draining training session where she had successfully healed a wolf with a festering wound through song alone, she found herself exhausted and emotionally overwhelmed. Constantine carried her back to her chambers himself, dismissing the servants, and ran her a bath with his own hands, adding fragrant oils to the steaming water. "You need to rest," he said gently, helping her out of her sweat-dampened dress with careful, respectful touches. "You pushed too hard today." "I wanted to prove I could do it," she admitted, her voice trembling with exhaustion. "I wanted to be worthy of the heritage you discovered." His hands stilled on her shoulders, and he turned her to face him, still in her chemise, his expression fierce. "You do not need to prove anything to anyone, least of all to me. You are already worthy, Arabelle. You have always been worthy." Tears spilled down her cheeks, the emotion of the day catching up to her. Constantine made a sound of distress and pulled her against his chest, holding her carefully, his large hands stroking her back in soothing circles. "Let me take care of you," he murmured. "Please, let me do this for you." She nodded against his chest, too tired to protest. He helped her into the bath, keeping his eyes averted to preserve her modesty, though she could see the tension in his jaw, the restraint it cost him. He settled beside the tub, and when she leaned her head back against the rim, he began to wash her hair himself, his strong fingers gentle as they massaged her scalp, working the soap through her long blonde strands. It was intimate in a way that had nothing to do with desire, and everything to do with trust, with care, with love expressed through service. Arabelle felt herself relaxing under his ministrations, the exhaustion draining away to be replaced by a bone-deep contentment. "No one has ever cared for me like this," she said softly. "Then everyone before me was a fool." His fingers continued their gentle work. "You deserve to be cherished, Arabelle. You deserve to have someone attend to your needs, to comfort you when you are weary, to celebrate your victories and mourn your defeats. You deserve everything." When he finished rinsing her hair, he wrapped her in warm towels and carried her to the bed, tucking her in with a tenderness that made her heart ache. He made to leave, to give her privacy to rest, but her hand shot out and caught his wrist. "Stay," she whispered. "Please. I do not want to be alone." He hesitated only a moment before nodding. He removed his boots and outer layers, leaving him in just his pants and shirt, and climbed onto the bed beside her, over the covers to maintain propriety. She immediately curled into his side, her head resting on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "Tell me about your mother," she said. "The one who owned these chambers before me." His hand came up to stroke her damp hair, his touch soothing. "She was fierce and kind in equal measure, much like you. She ruled beside my father with strength and compassion, beloved by all who knew her." His voice grew distant with memory. "She used to sing to me when I was young, before I understood what I would become. Her voice was beautiful, though nothing compared to yours." "What happened to her?" "She died in a battle defending our territory from invaders. She could have fled, saved herself, but she refused to abandon our people. My father died beside her, and I have ruled alone ever since." His arms tightened around her. "I used to think that was my fate, to always be alone. But then you sang, and everything changed." Arabelle tilted her head up to look at him, finding his storm-gray eyes already watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. "I am glad the goddess brought me to you," she said. "Even if the path was painful, even if I had to be broken first, I am glad it led me here." He leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. "As am I. I would endure 1,000 more years of loneliness if it meant finding you at the end." They stayed like that for hours, talking quietly about everything and nothing, sharing stories and dreams and fears, building intimacy through words and presence. At some point, they both drifted to sleep, still wrapped around each other, and when Arabelle woke in the deep of night, she found Constantine awake and watching her with such tender devotion that it made her chest ache. "Why are you not sleeping?" she whispered. "Because watching you is more restful than any sleep could be," he replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You are so beautiful, Arabelle. Not just your face, though that alone could stop hearts, but your spirit, your courage, your endless capacity for love despite everything that has been done to you. You humble me." She reached up, cupping his strong jaw in her small hand. "And you amaze me. The world sees a monster, a tyrant, a king carved from stone and fury. But I see a male who has loved so deeply that he locked his heart away to protect it from further pain. I see someone who has carried the weight of his people alone for centuries. I see someone worthy of love, Constantine. I see you." His breath hitched, and in the moonlight streaming through the window, she saw tears gather in his eyes. "You see too much," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I see exactly enough." She pulled him down to her, kissing him with all the love and conviction in her heart. He responded with a hunger tempered by gentleness, his hands framing her face like she was something holy. They kissed until they were both breathless, until the bond between them thrummed with energy, until the rest of the world fell away, and only they remained. One evening, perhaps 2 months after her arrival in Blackmoor, she found him on the battlements overlooking the city. He stood alone, the wind whipping his long dark hair around his shoulders, his expression distant and troubled. "Constantine?" she called softly, approaching him. He turned, and his face softened immediately upon seeing her. "Arabelle, you should be resting. I was worried about you." She came to stand beside him, looking out over the lights of the city below. "What troubles you?" He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "A messenger arrived today from the Eastern Territories. There are rogues gathering there, more than we have seen in decades. They are organizing, planning something." Fear clutched at her heart. "Will you have to go fight them?" "Yes." His jaw tightened. "I will leave in 3 days to lead the campaign." The thought of him leaving, of facing danger, made panic rise in her throat. "How long will you be gone?" "Weeks, perhaps months. I cannot know until I assess the threat." He turned to her, cupping her face in his hands. "I do not want to leave you, but I must. It is my duty to protect our kind." "I know," she whispered, even as her heart broke at the thought. "You are the king. You must do what is necessary." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I will come back to you, Arabelle. No army of rogues could keep me from you." "Promise me," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. "I promise. On my life, on my soul, I will return to you." They stood like that until the stars emerged overhead, holding each other as though they could stop time through will alone. The 3 days passed too quickly. Arabelle watched Constantine prepare for war, saw him transform from her gentle protector into the fearsome Lycan king of legend. He assembled his warriors, planned strategies, prepared for every contingency, and through it all, she felt the weight of impending separation growing heavier. On the morning of his departure, she met him in the courtyard where his army had gathered. He was dressed for battle, all black leather and silver armor, weapons strapped to his body, his long hair pulled back from his face. He looked every inch the deadly warrior, and her heart swelled with pride and fear in equal measure. He came to her, kneeling before her despite his armor, despite the hundreds of warriors watching. He took her hand and pressed it to his lips, then to his heart. "Wait for me," he said. "Always," she replied. He rose, and for a moment, she thought he would simply leave. But then he pulled her against him and kissed her, fierce and possessive and desperate, claiming her mouth with an intensity that stole her breath. It was their first real kiss, and it tasted of longing and promise and goodbye. When he pulled back, his eyes were molten silver. "Mine," he growled, the word both question and declaration. "Yours," she confirmed, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Come back to me, Constantine Blackmore. Nothing in this world or the next could keep me from you." He released her and mounted his horse, giving the signal to move out. She watched him ride through the gates at the head of his army, his figure growing smaller and smaller until he disappeared into the forest beyond. And then she was alone, standing in an empty courtyard, wondering how she would survive the weeks or months until his return. The days without Constantine were hollow. Arabelle threw herself into her studies, working with the scholars to unlock more of her abilities. She discovered she could sing healing songs that closed wounds, that she could sense the emotions of those around her, that she could even project her consciousness across distances in dreams. But every achievement felt empty without him there to share it. She took to walking the battlements each evening, staring toward the east where he had gone, praying to the moon goddess for his safety. The city below continued its rhythms, but she felt separate from it, waiting in suspension for life to resume. News arrived in fragments. Constantine's army had engaged the rogues. The fighting was fierce. Casualties were high on both sides. Each report made her stomach clench with fear, but there was never news of the king himself, which she took as a good sign. 6 weeks passed, then 8, then 10. On the night of the full moon, 2 months after Constantine's departure, Arabelle stood on her balcony and felt restless energy coursing through her veins. The moon hung huge and bright overhead, and she felt its pull in a way she never had before, as though it were calling to her, urging her toward something. Without fully understanding why, she began to sing. Not the Luna hymn this time, but something new, a melody that rose from deep within her soul. It was a song of longing and love, of waiting and hope, of a bond that transcended distance and time. She sang it with all the power she had learned to channel, pouring her will into the words, reaching out across the miles to the one her heart belonged to. The song rose higher and higher, filling the night, resonating with magic that made the air shimmer. She sang of Constantine, of his strength and his gentleness, of her faith that he would return. She sang until her throat ached, and tears streamed down her face, until she had nothing left to give. When the last note faded, she collapsed to her knees, exhausted, and in the silence that followed, she heard it. A howl, distant but unmistakable, the sound of a wolf calling to his mate. It came from the east, from the forest, growing closer with each passing second. Hope exploded in her chest. She ran, flying through the corridors of the keep, down the stairs, through the courtyard, to the gates that stood open to the night. Guards called after her, but she did not stop, could not stop, driven by a certainty that thrummed through every fiber of her being. She reached the edge of the forest, just as a massive black wolf emerged from between the trees, its coat darker than midnight, its eyes gleaming silver in the moonlight. It was Constantine, in his true form, and he was magnificent and terrifying and beautiful all at once. He shifted as he ran, his wolf form flowing into his human shape without breaking stride. And then he was before her, dirty and blood-stained and exhausted, but alive, whole, real. Arabelle, he breathed. And then she was in his arms, and he was lifting her off the ground, crushing her against his chest, as though he would never let go. "You came back," she sobbed into his neck. "You came back. I heard you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Your song called to me across 100 miles. I felt it in my soul, pulling me home." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands framing her face, his eyes devouring every detail as though memorizing her all over again. "I left my commanders to finish the campaign. Nothing could have stopped me from returning to you. Nothing in this world or the next." She kissed him then, pouring every ounce of love and relief and joy into the contact. He responded with matching fervor, one hand tangling in her hair, the other pressing her closer, as though he were trying to merge them into one being. The kiss was desperate, hungry, filled with 2 months of separation and longing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said, the words tumbling out like a confession. "I have loved you from the moment I heard you sing, and I will love you until the stars go dark and the world ends. You are my mate, my heart, my everything. These past 2 months without you have been torture. I felt like half of my soul was missing. I love you too," she whispered, her own tears mingling with the dirt on his face. "I am yours, Constantine, completely and forever. I have been counting every day, every hour until you return to me." His eyes flashed with that possessive light she had come to know, and he kissed her again, softer this time, but no less intense. "Then let me claim you properly," he murmured against her lips. "Let me make you mine before the moon goddess and all our kind. Be my mate, my Luna, my queen. I cannot wait any longer, Arabelle. I need you as I need air to breathe." "Yes," she breathed without hesitation. "Yes, to all of it. I want to be yours in every way possible." He swept her into his arms, carrying her back toward the keep, as wolves began to emerge from the forest behind them. His warriors returned from battle. They howled their approval, a chorus of celebration that echoed through the night. But Arabelle barely heard them. Her entire focus was on Constantine, on the way he held her as though she were the most precious thing in existence, on the way his eyes never left her face. He carried her not to her chambers or his, but to a private wing of the keep she had never entered before. The rooms there were clearly meant for the king and his mate, decorated in silvers and blacks, elegant and powerful. He set her down gently in the bathing chamber, where servants had already prepared a steaming bath, clearly anticipating their king's needs. "Let me wash away the blood of battle before I touch you properly," he said, his voice hoarse. "I would not bring the stain of war to what we share." Arabelle helped him remove his torn and dirtied clothes, her hands gentle on his skin, cataloging the new scars he had earned, the bruises that were already fading thanks to his lichen healing. Each mark made her heart ache, but he was alive, he was here, and that was all that mattered. She washed him herself, her hands careful as they cleaned away the grime and blood, and he submitted to her care with a vulnerability that spoke of absolute trust. When she poured water over his long dark hair, rinsing away the dirt, he closed his eyes and made a sound of contentment deep in his chest. "I dreamed of this," he admitted quietly. "Every night on the battlefield, I dreamed of your hands on me, your voice in my ears, your presence filling the emptiness inside me." "I dreamed of you too," she said, her fingers working through his hair. "I sang to the moon every night, asking the goddess to keep you safe, to bring you home to me." When he was clean, he rose from the bath, water streaming down his powerful form, and pulled her against him despite her still being clothed. He did not seem to care that she was getting wet. only that she was close. "These 2 months have taught me something," he said, his hands roaming her back, as though reassuring himself she was real. "Life is too short, even for someone like me who has lived centuries, to waste time waiting. I want to bond with you, Arabelle. I want to wake beside you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want our people to know that you are their Luna, that you are mine, and I am yours beyond any doubt." She pulled back enough to look up at him, her heart full to bursting. "How soon can we perform the ceremony?" A fierce smile crossed his face, transforming him from weary warrior to eager mate. 3 days. That will give time for preparations, for word to reach the other territories. But know this." His hands cupped her face with infinite tenderness. "In my heart, you are already my mate. The ceremony is merely formality. My soul recognized yours that first night, and it has been yours ever since. And mine has been yours," she replied, rising on her toes to kiss him once more. 3 days feels like an eternity, but I will wait. We have waited this long. We can wait a little longer to do this properly." But Constantine had other ideas. He pulled her into the bedroom, both of them still damp from the bath, and drew her down onto the massive bed. They lay facing each other, hands intertwined, and talked deep into the night about everything and nothing. He told her of the battles, of the rogues they had defeated, of the moments when fear had gripped him not for himself, but for her, for the possibility that he might not return. She told him of her training, of the powers she had discovered, of how she had felt his presence through the bond even across the distance, a constant reassurance that he still lived. At some point, talking turned to kissing, soft and exploratory at first, then deeper, more passionate. Constantine's restraint, already worn thin by months of separation, began to crack, but he pulled back before things could progress too far. 3 days, he said, his voice strained with the effort of control. "I promised you a proper bonding, and I will give you that. You deserve everything to be perfect, Arabelle." She smiled, loving him all the more for his consideration, even when desire clearly burned in his eyes. "Then 3 days it shall be, but stay with me tonight. Just hold me. I need to know you are really here. Always," he promised, gathering her close. "I will never spend another night apart from you if I can help it." The bonding ceremony took place 3 days later, time enough for Constantine to rest and recover, for preparations to be made. It was held under the full moon in a sacred grove just outside the city, attended by every wolf in the territory and representatives from packs across the realm. Arabelle wore a gown of silver silk that seemed to glow in the moonlight, her blonde hair crowned with flowers. Constantine stood waiting for her at the center of the grove, dressed in formal black embroidered with silver thread, his long dark hair loose around his shoulders. He looked like something from a dream, powerful and beautiful, and utterly focused on her. As she walked toward him, she felt the weight of hundreds of eyes, but they did not matter. Only he mattered. Only this moment. Only the bond that had saved them both from loneliness. The ceremony was conducted by the eldest priest among them, his voice carrying the weight of tradition and magic. Constantine and Arabelle stood before him, hands clasped, as he spoke the ancient words of binding. And when the moment came for her to sing the Luna hymn again, this time it was not mockery or performance. It was sacred truth, a prayer offered with her whole heart. Her voice rose pure and clear, filled with love and devotion, weaving magic that made the very air glow. Constantine's eyes never left her face, and she saw tears slip down his cheeks as she sang, the fierce king undone by emotion. When the final note faded, the priest declared them bonded for eternity. Constantine pulled her into his arms and kissed her as the crowd erupted in celebration, howls and cheers filling the night. "My Luna," he whispered against her lips. "My queen, my everything, my king," she replied. "My heart, my home." The feast that followed lasted until dawn, but Constantine and Arabelle slipped away before the sun rose, seeking privacy in the chambers he had prepared for them. Their joining was tender and passionate, a union of souls as much as bodies, the mate bond blazing between them like a living thing, until they could not tell where one ended and the other began. In the aftermath, as they lay tangled together in silk sheets, Constantine traced idle patterns on her skin and spoke softly of the future. "I want to show you the world," he said. "All the territories I rule, all the places of beauty and wonder I have seen in my long life. I want to share everything with you. And I want to use my voice to help our people," Arabelle said, "to heal, to protect, to bring the Luna-blessed gifts back to a world that has forgotten them. We will do both," Constantine promised. "Together, there is nothing we cannot accomplish." She tilted her head to look up at him, marveling at how his fierce features softened when he looked at her. "How did I get so lucky?" He smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Luck had nothing to do with it. The moon goddess knew exactly what she was doing when she bound us together. She gave me the one thing I needed most, the one soul who could see past the monster to the male beneath, and she gave you someone who will love you with every breath in his body, for all eternity. I was so lost before you," she whispered. "I thought I would spend my life alone, rejected and broken. And I thought I would spend eternity cold and hollow, a weapon with no purpose beyond duty." His arms tightened around her. "But we found each other, Arabelle. Against all odds, across all obstacles, we found each other. That is not chance. That is fate." She snuggled closer, feeling safe and loved and completely content for the first time in her life. Outside their window, she could hear the city beginning to wake, the sounds of life continuing in the world beyond. But in this moment, the world consisted only of the two of them, two souls finally complete. The seasons turned, winter giving way to spring, spring to summer. Arabelle grew into her role as Luna Queen with surprising ease, her gentle nature and her gift for healing making her beloved among the people. Constantine ruled with strength tempered by her compassion, the two of them balancing each other perfectly. She continued to develop her abilities, learning new ways to channel her divine heritage. Her voice could now break curses that had lasted centuries, could calm the most savage of feral rogues, could even commune with the moon goddess herself in moments of deep meditation. She used these gifts to serve their people, becoming a beacon of hope and healing. But her greatest joy was still the quiet moments with Constantine, the evenings spent in each other's arms, the mornings waking to his kisses, the knowledge that she was loved beyond measure by the most powerful creature alive. He remained fierce to the world, the Lichen King whose name struck fear into the hearts of enemies. But with her, he was simply Constantine, the male who brought her tea when she studied late into the night, who sang to her in his rough voice when she could not sleep, who held her through nightmares and celebrated her victories as his own. Their love became the stuff of legend, a story told around fires in packs across the realm. The rejected Omega and the cursed king, brought together by fate, and a song that changed everything. Mothers sang the tale to their children, and lovers hoped for a bond even half as strong. And on clear nights, when the moon hung full and bright overhead, Arabelle would stand on their balcony and sing the Luna hymn, her voice carrying across the city, a reminder to all who heard it that true love existed, that mates were real, that even the most broken souls could find healing in each other's arms. Constantine would join her, standing behind her with his arms wrapped around her waist, adding his deeper voice to hers in harmony. And in those moments, the magic they created together was so pure, so powerful, that even the stars seemed to shine brighter, as though the heavens themselves celebrated the love between a king and his queen. Years passed, decades, and their bond only grew stronger. They faced challenges together, defeated enemies, brought peace to warring packs, expanded their territory until it encompassed half the realm. Arabelle bore him children, strong and beautiful cubs who inherited her divine heritage and his ancient power, creating a new line that would change their world. But through it all, the core of their existence remained the same. Two souls who had found each other against impossible odds, who had chosen to love despite every reason not to, who had proved that mates were real and that the moon goddess did not make mistakes. On the evening of their 50th anniversary, Constantine took Arabelle back to the grove where they had been bonded. The place looked the same, unchanged by time, sacred and eternal. They stood at its center, holding hands, looking at each other with the same intensity they had felt on that first night. 50 years, Constantine said softly, and yet it feels like no time at all. I am still as captivated by you as I was the moment I heard you sing. And I still find you in every dream, Arabelle replied, reaching up to touch his face. His long dark hair had threads of silver now, though he remained as strong and vital as ever. You are still my Constantine, the male who chose to love a broken Omega and showed her she was a queen. You were never broken, he corrected, as he had so many times over the years. You were only waiting to be found. She smiled, tears of joy slipping down her cheeks. Then I am glad it was you who found me. He pulled her close, and they swayed together in the moonlight, dancing to music only they could hear. Above them, the moon shone down, the goddess watching over her children, satisfied with the love she had woven between them. And as they danced, Arabelle began to sing, her voice as pure and powerful as it had been 50 years ago, filled with all the love and joy and gratitude in her heart. Constantine joined her, their voices blending in perfect harmony, creating magic that rippled outward across the realm, touching every wolf who heard it with a blessing of hope. They were the Omega and the King, the Luna Blessed and the Cursed, brought together by fate and bound by love, and their story would echo through eternity, a reminder that even in a world of darkness and cruelty, light could still break through, that true love was worth waiting for, and that every broken soul had the chance to find healing in the arms of the one meant for them. As the last notes of their song faded into the night, Constantine whispered against her hair, I love you, Arabelle. Today, tomorrow, and forever. Forever, she agreed, her heart full to bursting with a happiness she had never dreamed possible. And under the watchful eye of the moon, the Lycan King and his Luna Queen held each other close, two souls finally home, their love story complete and perfect and eternal. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.